Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Jungle, a Cincinnati Bengals-based podcast brought to you by the Riverfront and Blue Wire. My name is Caroline Palmer. I am joined again this week by Seth Shaner, and we have a lot to talk about this week. I mean, everyone, for the most part, barring some not really surprising omissions, are back at training camp, but there's a couple big highlights from both a coaching and management side and from a player perspective here.
Yeah, and obviously the known kind of going in. I don't think any of us expected Trey Hendrickson or Shemar Stewart to show up on day one. So I guess the expected has happened, and we'll just see where it goes.
Yeah, so we'll start with Trey Hendrickson. So obviously that's the big one, NFL sack leader. It's been going on, hasn't participated in any team activity since the end of last season. Reports came out from, I first saw it from Adam Schefter, but correct me if I'm wrong here, but they actually had offered Hendrickson 2 deals in the last 48 hours for his contract, both of which were declined by Hendrickson's camp. And the reason behind negotiations has actually now come to light, and it is the amount of guaranteed money involved in the contract and the fact that the Bengals will not give him guaranteed money past the first year. So we now know that that is what the big question mark in the Hendrickson deal is, and he's not even in Cincinnati anymore. Him and his family are now down in Jacksonville.
Yeah, he's not, and that's a posturing move, I would say. And Diana Rossini from The Athletic, she had an exclusive story. Like for me, and I don't know how you feel about this, when I read Adam Schefter tweets, which I don't even subscribe to him, but they come up anyway, my eyes just glaze over. I don't know. I don't put a lot of stock in the things he tweets or says. He does work very hard to get information. I understand that. But when Trey himself talks to Diana Rossini for an exclusive interview, I read a lot more into that. And it's he claimed that the guarantees. Now I think there's obviously I think there's some guarantee money after year one, but the amount wasn't what he wanted. And he even said that he probably would have. And it's not real. That's not real money because non-guaranteed money isn't real until it is, right? So. He said he would take less overall if it meant more in guarantees stretched out. But again, the Bengals are operating more and more like the rest of the NFL, where after the guarantees are paid out, they're minute to minute, year to year, and so they're not likely to say, "Oh yeah, we'll give you less overall, but we're going to guarantee you more," because the guaranteed money is all that really matters.
Yeah, it's just a very, complex situation, I think, and obviously, people can be very upfront and be like, "Oh, it's a money issue," but I feel like you're seeing it now a lot, particularly at that position. If you just look across the league at the market of good defensive ends, I mean, the 2 glaringly obvious ones are Myles Garrett and Max Crosby both getting these huge contract deals. TJ Watt just signed this huge contract deal. You're looking at a guy in Hendrickson who was better than all of them arguably last year, and he's asking for this money that the Bengals either won't give or some argue don't even have to give him right now. And I think both sides have got to be extremely frustrated, especially I think he wants to be there. I don't think this is a fact where he's like, I don't want to be at training camp. I don't want to be there. I just think he's in this position where he's like, I have earned this money and the organization is not providing it for me. I can't imagine how frustrated both sides of the coin have to be that this isn't going through at this point.
Well, this reminds me of baseball when they have arbitration hearings. And, the Bengals love Trey Hendrickson and what he brings to the table. I know the coaching staff loves him. The players love him. And I truly do believe Mike Brown was very careful in what he said. I want to get to that in a minute. But this is kind of like arbitration hearings in that it doesn't matter how much they love you. When the door closes and you start negotiating, or in the case of baseball, when you start presenting to the arbitrator, you're going to say some stuff, okay? And so the things you just said about Hendrickson are technically true, but the Bengals in this negotiation are saying, listen, he's got a lot of sacks. We love it. We're happy he does that, but sacks aren't everything. And actually, it's funny because they kind of proved that by drafting Shemar Stewart, right? Because Shemar Stewart's the total opposite of Hendrickson. Shemar Stewart has the Myles Garrett athleticism and body type that Hendrickson just doesn't have. And
Mhm.
yet Shemar, though, doesn't get to the quarterback. And so he's putting up all these other numbers that say, oh, well, look how much he affects the quarterback and this, that, and the other. And look how he affects the run game. And we can put him inside a little bit. You can't do that with Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson is a pin his ears back and go sack the quarterback player. And so the Bengals are using that against him, I'm sure, in these
Mhm.
negotiations. They're also using his age, right? Because
Yes.
guaranteeing the first year seems fine. But beyond that, it's tough because he's over 30 then, and he's getting closer and closer to where these guys just drop off production wise.
Yeah, it's very interesting just watching the 2 situations between Hendrickson and Stewart kind of unfold at the same time. Granted, the contracts are over 2 completely different
Hmm.
aspects. One is, actual, like, monetary value, and the other one, you're looking more at, like, clause and wording and just, like, injury protection is basically the difference between the 2, and, like, the shortest summary Spark Notes way possible is the difference in the conflicts there. But, like, again, like, the Shamar and Trey are 2 very different players. Like, it's very interesting to see the difference in the negotiation process and honestly how much more, I don't want to say backlash has come out directed towards Shamar Stewart's case more so than Trey Hendrickson's case because I feel like the Hendrickson one has drawn out longer. But I feel like you see in that particular situation, more people are attacking the Bengals as an organization. But when you look at the Shamar Stewart one, recently I feel like more people have started lashing out at the Bengals. But in the beginning, it was a lot of what is Shamar Stewart's team thinking? And I
Yeah,
feel like it's been very interesting to kind of like compare and contrast the two situations.
I brought up the Mike Brown thoughts. Let me
Hmm.
kind of talk about that for a minute. The
Yeah.
So year after year, the only time Mike Brown talks to the media, with the exception of maybe Dan Horde for a private interview for the pregame show or something like that, the only time Mike Brown talks to the media is at mock turtle soup day, which they serve mock turtle soup to the media, and then they break down and he talks. And so, like years ago, when I was at Ohio State with student radio, we would go interview. Well, we go to a brunch, like basically. Actually, I think every week we went to a brunch, like on a Monday morning, and they would break it down at the time. And it's less like this now because obviously everybody uses video in one way or another.
Hmm.
But it used to be we're going to do TV, we're going to do print, and we're going to do radio. And they would break it into 3 smaller groups. And I heard Paul Daner Jr. call them pods the other day. All right. So realistically, if they're asking the same questions, Mike Brown had to talk on these subjects 3 different times because they did break it into 3 pods when he talked. And apparently, the first time he talked, he referred to Trey Hendrickson as an emotional guy. And he said, I don't want to offend Trey because he's an emotional guy, which
Hmm.
I think we could agree is true, right?
Yes.
Um, but it seems like everything they talk about there, it's, hey, we love Trey. We want to make it work. They seem very optimistic, but then the next
Hmm.
day, that's when Trey flew back to Florida.
Yes.
So we understand there are, posturing and things like that that happens. Now in Shemar, it was totally different. And I found both. So Duke Tobin, he maybe talks 2 to 3 times a year. So it's if we were beat writers or if we covered the team regularly, we would have flocked to this because it's the only
Yeah.
chance to talk to these guys really. And they went on the offensive against the agent, as you mentioned. And you and I have talked about just last week. You've talked all spring and summer. It seems like what they said, what the management and owner of the team said, is exactly what we've been saying. It's not about money. It's about this clause that literally every other team in the league is using now. And Duke Tobin went as far to say, I think it was Kelsey Conway, but I only heard the audio. So I want to give her credit if she asked the question. She asked, well, could you just bend a little bit and kind of go back to the way you did for Mims's contract and make it more like that, like they're saying? And Duke Tobin was pretty funny. And again, we can talk about this. It feels like they want to, like they're causing us to want to support the ownership in this because of the way the agent's handling this. And he stopped her in her tracks and he said, "What? So we can't evolve, and the Bengals are the only team that can't evolve in the way they do contracts." Which is hilarious because for years
Yeah.
we always said the Bengals did not evolve, and
Hmm.
yet he's like, and she says, "No, I'm just saying from their perspective, from Shamar's perspective, his agent's perspective. That's what they're saying." Could you do that? And so he's like, no, every other team is doing this. We're going to do it too.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I found a direct quote. I don't know exactly who did the interview, but they basically asked him about how they feel, and basically Tobin was like, "I think Shemar needs to be here." And he went on to say that he doesn't blame Shemar. He's listening to the advice that he pays for, and he doesn't understand or really agree with where the advice is coming from. And basically went on to say if we felt that we were treating Shemar unfairly, like maybe we would have compromised by now. But basically, what he's saying is from a Bengals organization standpoint, they do not believe that they're treating Shemar Stewart unfairly compared to other people in the first round of this year's draft. And I guess that's where they're just like, they're kind of like us. Like they're scratching our heads a little bit at like, it's turning into one of the longer rookie holdouts of at least recent memory. And they're just kind of, they feel like their hands are tied kind of a little bit is the vibe I'm starting to get is they don't really know what else to do because like you mentioned, they're not fully going to bend the knee to Shamar Stewart's side because they don't believe that that's the right thing to do.
No, and listen, I've got a friend who I've kind of looked up to since I was a freshman in college, and he graduated the year I was a freshman, but he hung around campus a little bit. He was doing some work for TV stations, things like that. His thing has always been, even going back 25 years, why would you support a billionaire owner? I put that in italics or in
Yeah.
quotes. It's not, they don't have $1 billion in their pocket, but why would you support the owner over the player like almost ever, right? And normally I feel that way because like the Reds will cry poor and say that they're a small market team, and yet they're making money every year and they're not putting it back on the field as much as we'd like. But this situation just has everything turned around because a guy needs to realize, and it's happened now in NIL spaces in college as well, where a guy
Mhm.
leaves when he doesn't really want to leave for like pennies for a few extra pennies. The guy needs to realize that the agent works for him. And actually, Paul Daner Jr. and those guys brought out a lot of players that this agent reps over the last several years. And there's cases in almost every one of them where he ended up getting them in positions where it's not ideal for them. And I
Mhm.
would say to Duke Tobin, what you already just said, if you're a rookie, and your point last week was great. Like the guy that you are basically looking to replace eventually is holding out. Their defensive line for the Bengals is probably the weakest link as far as depth on the
Yeah.
team. Why wouldn't you want to be there? Even back for OTAs, but especially
Mhm.
now.
Yeah.
And again, you've got to basically tell the agent, you work for me.
Yeah. And there's an interesting thing that I saw the other day where I feel like this is like just kind of something they've thrown out in the universe, especially when it comes to the Hendrickson side of this thing, because his is more monetary focus. They've now brought in, okay, so they can't pay Hendrickson because we just spent $90 million a year on our two wide receivers. And the big one that they're highlighting is T. Higgins. People are now throwing into question what if we gave T. Higgins less money? We might not even be in the situation that we're in right now. So I think this is now going to be a testament both on the organizational side and this we've put 75% of our cost cap into three players on the offensive side of the ball. It, we're going to see really this year if it was worth that money or if they kind of just did it on a whim because I again I sparingly listen to some of these like morning ESPN shows because I know a lot of it can be viewer based and like clip farming and all of that stuff. But something that they said was really interesting is last year, obviously Joe Burrow was the standout on the team in terms of performance, but they would not have made it as far as they did if Hendrickson wasn't the league leader in sacks. Like you need that guy or you need some type of prominent figure on defense. And Zach Taylor named the three guys who are leading the locker room and the defensive room as Joseph Osai, Cam Sample, and Miles Murphy. No offense to those three guys, great guys, but those aren't the guys that are going to get you to the Super Bowl, which is why they've paid Chase Burrow and T. Higgins now all of this money. So now this is where I feel like the organization is going to catch some, I would say, quote unquote, hot water. I would put it very lightly, is that this is where they're going to get tested. It's going to be proven, can you put all this money into your offense and be successful when you're sacrificing one, potentially two people on the defensive side of the ball. One, your big defensive starter, and two, your first round draft pick, because they've already paid everyone else. My alarm bells went off when Demetrius Knight signed his contract a couple days ago, their second round pick. He's there. He's going to play. And at this point, he could be a starter at the rate that the Bengals defensive ends are holding out at this point. But again, it kind of ties back to everything we said last week. I just don't understand why Shemar doesn't want to be there. He has one of the best opportunities in football to come in and be a starter at a position where it is very hard to, because they're a very talented group right now across the league. It blows my mind in more ways than one.
Well, and again, to recap, it's not about money. The money's agreed to because it's in a
No.
slot. It's a slotted amount. They've even agreed to how they pay it out, which
Yep.
even going back, it wasn't even just the Bengals. I remember Joey Bosa kind of was late to sign because the Chargers wanted to dole out the bonus over a longer period of time, and he
Yep.
wanted it right away. And so arguably, well, not arguably, apparently, this is already all agreed to. It's just this one clause. And the problem becomes, does Shemar Stewart have a skeleton in his closet? Like, did he already do something that could cause him to be arrested down the road? Because even Mike Brown said this is basically it. And
Yeah.
again, he did this 3 different times. One of the times he talked about domestic violence. The other time he just talked about being in jail, right? Or prison. And it's like, this is crazy that this is what it is. Now, to your point earlier, they made that decision. Now, when T. Higgins signed, I'd say well over 90% of the fan base was happy when T and Jamar both got done. Now, again, I'll go back in the Wayback Machine for me. Barry Larkin was a longtime Cincinnati Red. He's a Hall of Famer. He only played for the Reds. There was a time in 2000, end of 2000, beginning of 2001, somewhere in there, where the New York Mets had a deal in place for him. I think it was actually the trade deadline of 2000. The New York Mets had a deal in place to get Barry Larkin. And ownership got fidgety, and they said no. And they gave him a 3-year deal, which at the time was worth $27 million, which 2001, 2, and or 2001, 2, 3, maybe it's the 01. So it was 02, 3, and 4 because he played the 04 season.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of money back then. And those were arguably, even if he was healthy, those were arguably, especially the last year, his worst years of his career because he was old. He was older.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was on board to make sure he didn't become a New York Met. And then in the end, it ended up costing so much money that they really couldn't afford to do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Bengals have a cap, right? That's a little different
Yep.
than baseball. So it's not just saying they turned out their pockets and say we don't have any more money. You're right. The percentages say, but that's why they drafted who they did. That's why Knight is going to be a starting linebacker right away because Jermaine Pratt was done. They weren't going to pay him anymore, and you're going to get younger. And that's how
Mm-hmm.
they have to operate now. They can't swing and miss in the draft. And that's why Shemar Stewart, whether it was because he never had any sacks in college or whether now because he's not even close to coming to camp, that's a swing and miss so far.
Yeah.
Caroline, what's going to make this not a swing and miss from right now? Like, even if he came in tomorrow, like what could Shemar Stewart do to make this not a swing and miss when you've detailed how much money you've got going to the offense? So you've got to be cheaper on the defense.
Honestly, to me, what would constitute, like, I think at this point he is at some level of bust if you just look at like the craziness of the media that it causes, because you can obviously look at a performance aspect of a bust, but you can argue that some of the greatest NFL players, especially when you look at the early 2000s, were fantastic performers, but off the field they were bust in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the way they acted when they were not playing football. Right now, I think it's 100% solidified that he's going to be a bust just based on his off the field actions and the way his agent is making him look. Whether it is him in charge of that personality drive or not, they've made him look like a bust, at least personality wise, in my opinion. I would like to be proven wrong here. I really would. But I think at this point, he needs to get into training camp as soon as possible. And I'm kind of going to segue into a press conference that I saw with Zach Taylor, because this is why I think it's important. Owen and I have harped since the end of the season that the Bengals need something to change this offseason because they have had horrible starts the last 3 years, and something has to change. Zach Taylor has said in a press conference that he's going to try something a little bit unprecedented in today's preseason where his starters are going to play more. So for Shemar Stewart, for me, to really get involved in this Bengals team, He needs to be back as soon as possible. He needs to be back for preseason, especially because you're going to get more minutes as a Bengals starter than you would in comparison to other starters around the league. I think with this like kind of declaration that they're going to play more than they normally do, he needs to be back playing football, needs to gel with these guys. Because if Hendrickson's not there, you need to gel with whatever new guy is going to be taking lead on that defense. Or maybe that even becomes you based on
Mhm.
where you are on the field. But you can't do anything from the sidelines, whether you're injured, whether you're holding out, whether you're sick, or whatever the reason is that you're not there. The other guys around you are getting better every day that you're not there. I don't care that you were the 17th pick in the draft and you have pick number 300 something that's vying for the same position as you. He's at practice and you're not. That's what it is right now at the end of the day because everyone starts at a clean slate come to preseason. And right now he's falling behind with every day he's not playing football.
Well, and it's interesting because I think because they played the starters a little more last year than they had even the previous 4 or 5 years. But I think you're right. I think the intention is to play even more this year. But I think a guy like Dylan Fairchild is likely to be the starter. That's his name, right? Dylan Fairchild,
I believe so.
left guard. Stu Fairchild was a Reds player, and I just keep
Hmm.
twisting it. But no, so I think he would get more snaps anyway, right? Than the regular starters because they're trying to get him acclimated.
Hmm.
And Shemar Stewart might be the same way. Totally different thing. But last year, um, they were playing guys that you thought would be playing with the ones. Like, hey, a little bit out here. Jermaine Burton didn't play till like late fourth quarter. And
Hmm.
that showed you without anybody, no reporters knew until the regular season that there was things behind the scenes not going well. But it was like, wait a minute. This guy's supposed to be your deep threat, possibly.
Hmm.
And that last year, their slot receiver situation was up for grabs because Tyler Boyd was gone. And it was like, wait a minute, why isn't Joe Burrow throwing this guy, go routes in a preseason game? And it wasn't even that. He wasn't even playing until mid fourth quarter.
Hmm.
And so you're not going to see that with your number one pick necessarily. But if he's not on board, if he's not, I mean, no reps is bad. That's really
Yeah.
bad.
And what I think is interesting as well from that Zach Taylor press conference, and I feel like it's more, I mean, you could direct it towards Hendrickson and Shemar Stewart because both of them are kind of these glaring distractions. And he basically said, the guys that are here don't want anything to do with them. Like they have completely shut them out of their mind. The guys who are here to do business. They're here to get their job done. They're here to help us win games. And I honestly think that that's so important. So whoever in that locker room is stepping up to be like, we are not talking about this. We are not discussing it. We are not having conversations about it. We're going to pretend like these two guys do not exist in our brain right now because they're not here. I think that's the best way that the Bengals as players can approach this situation because honestly, it's kind of like the way social media and everything works these days is the more fuel you'll add to the fire, the more distracting it becomes. And I think the Bengals, at least internally, as much as they can, are trying to put out that fire and not let the absence of Shemar Stewart and Trey Hendrickson impact the way they go about training camp. It's going to be business as usual for them, which I think is exactly the way they need to do it.
Yeah, they can't afford to do it any other way. I mean, there's 90 players in camp, and you're trying to get down to 53, and then you had I don't know, 10 to 12 for practice squad. But these guys, the guys at the bottom are trying to make a team. There aren't
Hmm.
that many open jobs on this team, but what there are, they're going to have to just really put their nose to the grindstone and go get it done. So like and there's probably just a gag order overall, right? I mean, nobody wants to upset the apple cart when it comes to talking about something. And usually what happens is the players say, "Hey, it's a business, we understand it. They've got to handle their business, but we're here to handle ours." And that's really the way it has to be because there's no time. If somebody was to start popping off in the media about this and take their focus off what they should be doing, it's not going to work.
Yeah, it's just I feel like all eyes are on Cincinnati now, just because I feel like the biggest holdouts are now in the Cincinnati world because TJ Watt has signed his contract. The only other one that can take some heat off is Micah Parsons not even being offered a contract from the Cowboys yet. That's the only one that's kind of a little bit throwing its nose in there, but for the most part, It'll be interesting because there's going to be a lot of NFL eyes, NFL analysts, NFL reporter eyes on Cincinnati to see, especially with Hendrickson, because I feel like all in all, everyone is more optimistic about that one getting solved in the near future. But I just feel like eyes are going to be on Cincinnati for the next couple of weeks as preseason rolls along, as they try to figure out what is going on with these two players.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is Jerry Jones, nobody would assume he operates the way the Bengals do, but they actually kind of do. And he made
Mhm.
a funny point. Well, not haha, but he made this point the other day. He basically said the reason he waits longer to pay these guys, even though it means he ends up having to pay them more, is he's making sure it's not a foolish investment. And that struck me as like, wait a minute, that's kind of what happened with Jamar Chase. And certainly Jamar's never done anything to make you think it's not. But I suppose you wait long enough and then you don't have an injury or you don't have some of the things that maybe could. Now you pay them and then maybe something happens. I get that.
Yeah.
But we were all upset, a year ago when they could have gotten Jamar Chase for a lot less, right?
Yeah.
That's how Jerry Jones has done so many deals, from Dak Prescott to even Zeke Elliott and now Micah Parsons. He's waiting, and
Mhm.
just it is what it is. But and I don't really, certainly the Cowboys aren't the example you're looking to model your
No,
franchise after.
definitely not,
Uh,
especially not in the last 20 years.
but it also shows that these owners do have the money, right?
Mhm.
And he would rather take the calculated risk of, I might pay them more in the end, but I'm not going to waste that money on somebody that I'm going to be paying to go away or something like that earlier. Or I'm going
Yeah, or,
to,
like, even in the case of, like, Dak Prescott for the Cowboys or, like, for Jamar Chase for the Bengals, it gives them an opportunity to prove their worth, and
mm-hmm.
if you can prove your worth or prove more than your worth, you'll get the money, which again is another thing where I look at Shemar Stewart, I'm like, "What have you proven in an NFL uniform? Nothing." Like,
Well,
that's the other thing that we're like, when I look at Hendrickson versus Shemar, I'm like, Trey Hendrickson is a proven NFL player, double-time sack leader, has had double-digit sacks in almost all of the last 5 years, was the runner-up for defensive player of the year last year. He's a proven guy. You do not have the NFL stats. You hardly even had the college stats to prove yourself. So that's where I get completely thrown off in the situation, especially if you try to compare in that aspect. But again, it's just going to be, I mean, we'll be watching it. Everyone's going to be watching it, is how the Cincinnati spectacle unfolds. I give it a week and I think we'll know a much better dealing of where everyone is come next week's episode.
I'll tell you one thing Shemar Stewart has proven. He proved he was willing to go into a locker room during OTAs when he wasn't even suiting up and get a gaggle of reporters around him. And he was willing to say that the players have his back and the players are on
Mhm.
his side and this, that, and the other. And then you never heard a peep out of any other players, to your point earlier. And
Yeah.
so he was willing. And the Bengals, again, like they're not going to budge on some of this stuff. And they're just, because we sat here from basically April to now, not knowing the Bengals stance, but we could assume the Bengals stance. And it turned out
Yes.
we are pretty much right that what their stance was, but they didn't have to go chirping to the media or on Twitter or something like that. And again, to your point, I don't think Mike Brown cares if some people think some things about him. Like, he's shown time and time again how he's going to run his organization, and they do it top to bottom. And I don't.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean I support all of it, but it is a reality.
Yeah. And it's just interesting. I mean, we'll probably be dealing with this all the way up to preseason, all the way up to this season. I guess just the big question mark we can leave with, and kind of as we look into next week, because I would hope that both deals get some type of renegotiation or offer out there in the next week, is I feel like we kind of all know how long Hendrickson would be willing to hold out for. I think he's pretty much decided that he's not going to go until he gets his money. My question to you is, and we can think about it, maybe come back to it next week, is how long do we think Shamar Stewart is willing to go? Do we think that as a rookie who has never played a snap at an OTA, never played a snap at a practice of whatever, is willing to hold out the entire season over one sentence in a document? I think that's just like food for thought, is do we really think that that's a possibility here?
I just think the agent's the wild card, because the agent, obviously the agent gets paid when Shamar gets paid, but again, I heard the breakdown of some of these players that have played for, like, with it, had him as their agent, and it's a cautionary tale across the league. And so the funny thing is to me, you just think about it. Like, he's not going to be a first round pick next year if he just walks and waits.
Mm-mm.
He hasn't played football. He won't be playing for a team. We discussed last week. He can't go back to his college team. Like, there's no way, especially, and then none of these teams, even the Ravens and some of these other teams, have had bad dealings with this agent. Like, teams we consider to be good for players.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if he keeps the same agent, he's not going to do that. And
Mm-mm.
so the agent's the wild card, though. If he advises him to do it, maybe he does. But
Yeah. But it'll be interesting. We will keep our eyes on everything. Who knows? Maybe we're throwing an emergency pod in 2 days because one of them signs a contract. You never know. That's what the interesting thing about this offseason is you never really know what's going on. And I feel like there's something new or some type of twist every time we come on to talk about it.
my prediction, though, on Hendrickson is I don't think he's going to miss any time. In fact,
Mm-mm.
I'll give it till the second preseason game, and I think he's back. And maybe he tries to do a mea culpa of like, hey, I'll take that one deal you offered me, or give me this little bit more than that last deal you offered.
Yeah.
And I just think Mike Brown's right. Trey's emotional. Trey has been unhappy with every contract he's signed with the Bengals basically before the ink is dry. And again, I'm not going to take big time owner's position over a player necessarily but it's not the Bengals' fault that the deck is stacked against these players. It's not the Bengals' fault that most contracts aren't fully guaranteed or even close to that. That's the rule. That's the collectively bargained situation. And so
Um,
Trey's been unhappy since every contract he signed with the Bengals, since basically it was
mhm.
ink on paper. And so I
Yeah.
just think he's going to have to come to grips with the fact that, hey, you've got a chance to play for a Super Bowl. And I think he'll be back between the second and third preseason game, if not before.
Yep. Well, like you said, the window's closing. Obviously, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, these guys have a prime. Trey Hendrickson's prime, you'd argue, is even shorter than that. But yeah, I mean, we just at this point have to see how the cards fall because there's a lot of different outcomes that could happen, whether it's in the next 24 hours, whether it's in the next week, whether it's in the next month leading up to preseason and regular season. There's a lot of different directions this could go. But whatever direction it goes, we'll be here to talk about it. And we will bring it all to you, whether it happens tonight, tomorrow, in a week, in a month, in 2 months. We'll be here to talk about it because that's what we do. All right.
Well, you ready to say goodbye?
I think so. I think we've got everything today. So for Seth Shaner, I'm Caroline Palmer. Thank you for listening, and Who Day.